and I think you'll enjoy it. And he loves to be interrupted, so ask any questions you got. I'm sure he would try to take a stab at it. So have fun.
Yeah. This is for you, not for me. So if you have any questions or you disagree with something, feel free. This is just about helping everyone get the information to make their own decisions. I recommend you don't take what a professor, an expert, preacher, media, or I tell you. You just take in your own information, make your own decisions. That's how I came to this whole thing. I was at Michigan. I'm reading this article by Stephen Jay Gould. We'll talk about it later. Brilliant guy, but the conclusion he came to was so foolish. I almost walked into traffic and got taken out of the gene pool, and that's what led to this talk. So, all right, going to be 3 parts to this. First thing we're going to do is we're going to come to an agreement kind of on what science and religion actually are, and I'm actually going to use the word theology. We'll get to that. After we do that, I'm going to take you a flow chart to the actual relationship between science and theology. And then finally, what's this mean to you as the watch person? And we'll explain that. All right, now, we are going to hit something, some science in this. So, what I want to first do is, some people immediately turn off when I say we're going to talk science. I'm in medical physics, so people are like, physics and science, no. I'll just think about boyfriend, girlfriend, or shopping list, or whatever. But a lot of people think science isn't their thing. Science is all of our thing. Every single one of us use science naturally every day since childhood. And I'm going to prove that with one of my earliest examples. Science, it's a method to gain knowledge. It gets all its power from the scientific method. That's what it's about. Here are just basic steps of the scientific method. You don't need to know any of them, because you do these naturally every day since childhood without even knowing any of these terms. Whoops, let me get back to that. Okay, I'll give you one of my earliest memories. In fact, we were so young, it was before kindergarten, I think, and we were so young, it was the very first field trip. There's maybe 8 of us and the teacher. We get out of the van all holding hands, we go into this museum. At the museum, I sit down and I'm holding hands, and then there's a teacher, more kids holding hands, and they were holding hands with the museum director, who was going to read us some story or something. I don't remember the story. I remember, though, I was a troublemaker and I got bored real easy. So I'm sitting there looking around. I was like, that electrical outlet is open. So that was my observation, step 1. Step 2, hypothesis, theory, model. If I jam my hand in here and hit all the prongs, will the shock just get me, or can I get it to go all the way around and get that guy reading to us? Step 3 is the fun. And, with your hypothesis, you have some background knowledge. I remember we had barbed wire fences, and certain things, if you touched it, it'd go through and zap you. My mom said, don't stick metal into a thing, so I was thinking, there's a good chance this might work. The fun part, step 3, testing data. I still remember this. And again, I'm doing all these steps naturally in my earliest memory. So we all do science. I jammed in and made sure I hit every prong I saw. A back straightening jolt hit me, and I saw it go all the way and hit the guy reading to us. Conclusion? Yes, I could get that guy, and now I'm sure in my results. All right. There we go. Okay.
Can't believe you're still alive.
It was a good jolt, though. Yeah. But yeah, trouble.
Maybe it made you smarter. I don't know.
Yeah.
Kids are awesome.
Yeah. All right, so watchman, so there's a watchman right there. All right, so let's say you got to keep track of a mansion. And as the watch person, or watchman in this case, he has to stay in an office. How's he keep track of the rest of the house? Well, from cameras. And you can't just have one camera. You got to have a bunch of cameras, even in the same rooms. You might need different cameras to get all the different corners and big rooms and so on. If you have that, that's a good system. You safely know your house is understood and safe. Now, where does science and religion come in? Each of you is the watch person of your own house. And if you want to keep aware of what's going on, you have a number of cameras. You have personal experience, you have science, you have math, you have history, you have philosophy, you have theology, psychology. There's a bunch of different cameras that give you different viewpoints and fields of view. So I don't like the word religion because religion, when people say what's the relationship between science and religion, I can already tell they don't know what they're talking about. Because religion is how people organize around a belief system. That's something different. So I'm going to use theology. So what are science and theology? They're simply different methods to gain knowledge about reality. So science has a very specific perspective or point of view. It uses the scientific method to study the natural world and explain things using initial conditions and natural laws. So it has that very specific field of view. Theology, on the other hand, has a different point of view. It gains its knowledge either through sources that have a connection to God or a person's study of God. That gives you another field of view. And this is the most interesting place to go looking. Because where they're both looking at the same thing, they should see the same thing if they're both a good, reliable viewpoint. So that's what we're going to focus on. So part one, what are science and theology? They're just different methods to gain facts about reality that are useful to a watch person. All right, so part two, we're already in part two, flow chart. People think it's really complicated, but really there's only so many options you can go with this, so we can get to an answer. If you have two different sources of knowledge, in this case we're going to use science and we're going to use theology. You got two different sources of knowledge. There's only two possibilities to start with. Either one or both methods are invalid. This white noise thing you see here, at my age, when I was even younger than you, there was only so many TV stations, and near the middle of the night, when they ran, basically they're like, okay, we're done, no one's watching TV, they shut off their signal, and you get this white noise. All right? That's what an invalid source of knowledge gives you. Let me give you an example. Astrology is here. If you believe that constellations that you were born under and their patterns can give you accurate knowledge about the future, you're wrong. You give me just a little bit of prep time and then 10 minutes of mathematics, I'll show you astrology is worthless as a source of information. It is white noise in your life, turn it off. You're wasting your time with it. Unless you just it gives you nothing usable that you can't get elsewhere. All right, here's the other option. Only two options. If both science and a theology can give you unique and accurate knowledge, now they're both over here. So these are our two options. I'm going to just tell you right off the bat, but I'll prove it in about 10 minutes, is if you're talking about science and theology, both of them are already over here. They both add unique and accurate knowledge. People wouldn't argue that about science, but a lot of people would argue that about theology, but I'll prove it in a second. Now, here's another issue. All the different theologies, if you're talking Islam, Christianity, atheism isn't a theology, but it's a belief system, same deal. They have their own point of view. Atheism, agnosticism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Mormonism, all of the different theologies or belief systems, they contradict each other on foundational issues. Therefore, by just basic logic, the law of non-contradiction, you can look that up if you haven't run across it. When they contradict each other, only one at most can fit reality. So you have to do all the different theologies or belief systems separately on this. We're going to do Christianity, and then you can do your own on your own. Or we can discuss it later. I can go through any different belief system on its own later. All right, now, if both sources are valid, let's go with biblical theology and science. If they're both valid sources, meaning adding accurate information, once again, there's only two possibilities. Either they do interact, meaning they study the same thing sometimes, or they do not. Now, Stephen Jay Gould, former Harvard professor, he had a theory called NOMA, non-overlapping magisteria. This is what I was reading where he almost killed me. Now, this guy, he has achievements longer than his article that he wrote about. This guy is brilliant. But brilliancy in an area doesn't mean you can't make foolish errors in other areas, and he does here, and will easily show that. So he said science has its own little magisteria, theology its own, never the twain shall meet. They never touch each other. All right? We'll show you in a second, of course, they cross over. They interact. Now I'm not going to go into all the depths, shoot down all his points. It's clear enough. But now I got to prove it. So here we go. Science and theologies, they do interact on the biggest, most fundamental question that impacts everything else, our origins, where we come from. This is cause and effect. This is what your thinking is based on and science is based on. Where we came from, we are an effect. What's the cause? Well, first of all, and we're going to do this using the steps of the scientific method, so obviously science and theologies interact. So let's start with an observation. We exist, universe is here. If we exist, there's only two possibilities. Either there was a beginning to the universe, or there was not. Those are the only two possibilities. Law of excluded middle, there's nothing else. It's one or the other. Now, step two are the different theories or models. This where it gets really interesting, because they divide very cleanly on this and give us a real thing to study. The general view of science, all the way up until Einstein's time, was there was no beginning. The universe is eternal. It always was, it always will be. It doesn't need any cause. The universe is what's eternal. It was a primary belief of atheism. Agnosticism usually follows that. And every belief system not founded on the Bible believed there was no beginning, maybe cycled, but still no beginning. And common experience. Sun goes up, sun goes down. Happened yesterday, it did today, it will tomorrow. So every other belief system and science is here. The Bible is here. Not only was it uniquely here, it gave a bunch of other predictions or claims about our origin. Now, you won't be able to read this, but we'll get into it more later. So, we got our theories. Now it's time to do test and data. And this is even more jolting to a lot of people than jamming the finger in the socket. You have some of the biggest names in science. You can see Einstein and Hubble there. You always know Hubble because he always had a pipe in his mouth, any picture I've ever seen of him. He's the guy who Hubble telescope was named after. You have multiple Nobel Prize winners, some of the greatest discoveries in modern science. And what did they find? All of the evidence that we have supports there was a beginning to the universe. There is zero evidence that the universe is eternal. When all of the evidence is on one side, and there's no evidence on the other side, even a graduate from Ohio State can figure out what that means. There was a beginning. In fact, this is Janet Levin. She's a professor of, I think, physics and astronomy at Columbia University. Her and a bunch of other big-name astronomers, they put together a video giving you the modern understanding of where we came from, because we got the answers. It was on a nature show. I'm going to have it up on my website when my website's all up and good. But basically, here it is. I'm going to give you right now the modern science understanding of the beginning of the universe. They don't usually call it Big Bang, they call it lambda cold dark matter model. But it's the same thing. It's just a little bit more advanced as more information comes in and supports it. And that's what you see. When you have a theory that over time, it just gets more and more evidence tying into it and refining it and growing it up, that's when you know you're on the right case, and that's exactly what we see with the beginning of the universe. So here's what we have. This is science's understanding. First, there was nothing. There was not anything. A lot of people think they picture a space existing, and then the universe came into existence in that. No, it's much more profound than that, as Janet Levin had said. There was not anything of the universe. Then all of a sudden, all of it came into existence in a very condensed, very hot moment. And in fact, the universe was so condensed and so hot, no light could escape. So even if you were right there watching this come into existence, you would see nothing, it'd be dark. From that point, immediately from that beginning point, the universe starts expanding and decaying following fixed laws. Now, so this is it. This is what we found, and they're calling it the greatest discoveries. Now, so here's what science now knows. All that's in the universe, all matter, energy, space, and even time itself had a beginning. Time had the beginning also. Space and time began together. They call it the fabric of space-time now. And first there was nothing at all. Then very small, very dense, very hot universe came into existence, and it released no light. And then finally space-time fabric began to expand and decay following fixed laws. Now, that's what we know. Now why do I have all those equal signs there? This is exactly what the Bible claimed thousands of years before modern science figured it out. Exactly. It's clear, it's specific, and it's multiple. In science, one of the best tests for truth is, does your model or theory predict something no one else should have known? This is exactly what we have. In fact, I'll just give you Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. When they use the word created, that's an ancient Hebrew word, bahara. I don't know if I pronounced that right, so don't hold me to that. But what that word means specifically is bringing into the existence something that never existed before out of what was not in existence before, and it's used in reference with what God can do. Now, in other places in Genesis, a lot of people don't know this, they use words of nature bringing some stuff forth. And it's just nature doing its natural processes. Not here. And when it says God created the heavens and the earth, heavens and earth, it's like butterfly. It doesn't mean butter or fly, it means something totally different. When you put heavens and earth together, it means all things in the natural universe. That is absolutely unique. It's against every other thought throughout history until science found out, whoa, that's exactly what we have. And this isn't me just saying this. I use atheist and agnostic quotes of the people directly involved. Let them tell you what they see. This is Robert Jastrow. He founded NASA's Goddard Institute of Space Studies. He says, an astronomical evidence leads to a biblical view of the origin of the world. The essential element in the astronomical account and biblical accounts of Genesis, and you could also throw in Psalms, Isaiah, and some others in it, is the same. Because there's creation accounts not just in Genesis. The Bible throws in a bunch of other places. Here's how he concludes this. For the scientist, so he was either atheist or agnostic when he found these discoveries. He said, for the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He's about to conquer the highest peak. And as he pulls himself over the final rock, he's greeted by a band of theologians who've been sitting there for centuries. And that's actually millennia. Penzias and Wilson, they were 2 Nobel Prize winners involved in all these top findings in science. Here's what they say. Let's see. They said, the best data we have concerning the beginning, or the Big Bang, are exactly what I would have predicted had I had nothing to go on but the books of Moses, the Psalms, and the Bible as a whole. Certainly there was something to set it all off. I can't imagine any better theory than the origin of the universe than to match Genesis. Mathematical physicist Frank Tipler says, from the perspective of the latest physical theories, Christianity is not a mere religion, it's an experimentally testable science. See, when Einstein was doing his relativity equations, he's like, oh, this makes it look like the universe is either expanding or collapsing, We know that's not right because we know it's a static universe. So he did that famous fudge factor. Then a Russian mathematician, Friedman, I think, was saying, man, Einstein, you got it right first time. Eventually, Edwin Hubble, when he was viewing the universe, he saw basically the Doppler effect, but with light. You know how when cars, they change pitch when they go, that's our universe is doing that. If you look anywhere else in the sky, except for Andromeda's heading towards us, that'll run into us at some point. Every other galaxy that's not too close to be pulled by gravity is going, it's redshifting, it's running away. Both of them put his equations together with Hubble's and some other things. They said, it looks like there's a beginning. They brought it to Sir Frederick Hoyle, who had the steady state theory or static universe theory at the time. He was one of the top astronomers at the time and an atheist. And When they said, it looks like there's a beginning, Hoyle knew exactly what that was. No other source was claiming this, so he said, that's scientific genesis. And later on in an interview on, I think it was BBC, it's some radio or TV interview, he said, what was it, a Big Bang, to kind of make fun of it. And that name stuck. Until now they're, they have the lambda cold dark matter model. So the people close to discoveries, they get it. This is scoreboard. Reality keeps track of this stuff. When you're testing different belief systems, they all contradict each other, so only one at most is going to fit reality. Reality cannot help but lift the one accurate belief system to a level the others can't reach, and there's a scoreboard of it. And if you look right where science interacts with theology, that is giving us the score. Oh, I think I'm at my nightmare time. Let's see. No, we're coming up on it though. All right, so here's step 4, scientific method. Conclusions. Some of the greatest discoveries in science give us this. Science and theologies interact. Clearly, no way around that. This interaction exposes as inaccurate the foundation of all non-biblical belief systems. Does that mean you need to throw away every other belief system? No, I wouldn't. But I would have a giant red warning flag above every other belief system, because where we came from is foundational, probably the most foundational. It'll impact the rest of that belief system. If they screw that up, they're not on really solid ground. So I wouldn't throw all the other ones away, but I'd be very wary now. On the other hand, the Bible called it out. So if you want to know the relationship shown between Christian theology and science, it's symbiotic. Now, this wasn't my idea. I have a new theory of the interaction of science and reality, and all the evidence supports it. But I didn't come up with the symbiotic part, which is the most important part, really. This is just obvious. Multiple scientists I knew. John Clayton, geologist, decades ago had this. Ross, I think, brought it up too. I spoke with him about it. Basically, symbiotic relationship in biology is this. When you have different organisms mutually benefiting and supporting each other. The clownfish go in the sea anemone and clean out gunk and also get great water flow, which it needs. The sea anemone, with its poison little barbs, protects these from other fish that want to eat them. This is a symbiotic relationship. It's exactly what we have with Christian theology and science. Now, well, what about the conflicts? Like Galileo. All right, let's look into that. Is it an apparent conflict or real? With the Galileo thing, what was happening is everyone at that time believed in Aristotle's view that the earth was the center and everything revolved around us, including the Catholic Church. Catholic Church also had some leaders who had some issues with Galileo, so they went after him a bit. Galileo and Copernicus both believed in the Bible, but they both said, you people at church and Aristotle got it all wrong though. The earth is going around the sun, we can see it. So, in that case, science helped out Christian theology and pointed out where people went beyond the Bible, got it wrong. With the Big Bang, it went in reverse. Science had it wrong. The Bible had it right, and finally they came into agreement. It is mutual, so, because the scientists weren't doing science well enough, or they just didn't have enough discoveries yet. All right, this is mutually beneficial and supportive. Here's the biggest thing. There's different ways there's different standards that you test for truth. Explanatory power, explanatory scope, lack of ad hoc and other bad logic, prediction, predictive ability. These things are all there. This is a massive one. The Bible gave multiple clear specific predictions 3,000 years in advance of modern science discoveries. Now, you're going to forget 99.5% of what I go over today, which is why I'm getting a website so you can have it all go back to it. Here's the one take-home thing. This is the only thing I want you to go home with. How could you know if there's a God behind something? Anyone have any ideas? How would you know? The Bible said there's a God behind it, but so does the Quran. What about the Vedas? What about the Book of Mormon? Supposedly there's a God behind that too. How would you know if there's a God behind something? Here's the answer. If it clicks, there we go. It has to show something beyond humanity's ability to produce. If you can't do that, then it's just probably man-made. When I was at U of M, I had a professor challenge me with some questions. Now, I was raised Christian, but when he challenged me with questions and I couldn't answer it, being raised Christian, I was just like, all right, either there is no God and I'm not wasting my time with this anymore, or there is, and I better darn well find out what kind of relationship that God seeks and which God is it. So, in that case, I started looking. How would I even know? It's a very clear test. If it needs to be beyond man-made stuff. It better show something beyond. Now, if you don't think so, I was at Cal Berkeley. At Cal Berkeley, we brought in some high school students to debate some graduate atheist students. Hundreds of people there. There was professors, graduate and undergraduate atheist groups. There was a Christian group. And I asked them, I gave this example. I said, the Bible predicted multiple clear specific things. Thousands of years of advanced modern science. I said, if you don't think there's a God behind it that is just man-made, then show me all the other man-made stuff that's equivalent to it. And don't even try to bring up Nostradamus. I'll stomp that one down real quick. Bring up something that has multiple clear specific predictions, 3,000 years of advanced modern science. Humanity isn't capable of that. If there's a God behind the Bible, then it is possible, and we found it. All right. Last part, the watchman, watch person, depending who it is. You are responsible for your house. You better have the right cameras turned off and the right ones turned on, because if you turn the wrong one off, it's in that little dark corner where disaster is going to enter your house. Because you base your thoughts, your choices, your responses to life, you base your goals, objectives, and your direction in life all on what you believe, your worldview beliefs. And if it's not accurate, your worldview beliefs are going to drop you into unexpected and disastrous consequences. So, as the watch person, we know there are some cameras that just aren't functioning. All those belief systems got that wrong. Would I totally shut them off? I wouldn't if that was the only thing, but I found other things. Then I'm shutting them off. Oh, my nightmare. Okay. At a physics conference with my buddy Travis, he's a massive Michigan State fan. I'm a big Michigan fan. And the game was going on, so me and him left the conference early, and we were searching to find some place where there was a TV, because we were listening to it on the radio. It came down to this play, and then there was like a commercial break, and then we found a store, we start watching it. Now, they had just shown two older Michigan State fans who were like this. And my friend Travis goes, "You see that guy? That's me." And I was like, "Yeah, that should be you, because you're done." and then my friend Travis goes into the stupidest little rant. He goes, "Well, okay, all right, there's that much time. So we're going to have to block the punt, and it's going to have to bounce, and we have to get it, and then run it in and not get tackled, and then we can have a touchdown, then we win." I'd say, "Yeah, that's what it would take for you to win." And I'm just like, whatever. And then this happened.
Whoa, he has trouble with the snap, and the ball is free. It's picked up by Michigan State's Jalen Watts Jackson, and he scores on the last play of the game. Unbelievable.
Scoreboard. How can we know what's true, especially with worldview beliefs? There's a scoreboard. Oh,
Go green, by the way.
wait. Oh, there's the old guys. Now look how happy they are. So then they went to that guy, and I had to do it. I said, "You see that guy? That's me." I got the surrender cobra going on. How do we know what's true? Same thing in everything else. The evidence stacks on one side, and there's a
I just
scoreboard
want
of
you
it.
to know, I'm a Michigan State Spartan, and I pray for that. And I danced the whole room when it happened.
Oh man, well your prayers are not got answered this year.
You were actually
This year I
watching that?
pretended I was Wolverine.
Yeah, right. So this little stance has come to be known as the surrender cobra. What it basically is when all of your hopes and your opinions and your claims and your expectations get run over by reality, you just do that. You are facing the scoreboard of reality that just went against your expectations, because you're not going to win against reality. So, what is the relationship between science and Christian theology? They both provide unique and accurate knowledge. They do interact. Now there's only, in all of science and philosophical literature, there's only 5 options. This is the one that I came up with, adding on to others. There's only 5 options. And on one end of the agreement continuum, you have conflict. This is basically saying science is just going to keep, the more discoveries, it'll eat away the belief theology until it just exposes it as nothing. On the other end, William Dembski, excellent scientist, he was given a talk at, there's probably a couple thousand people there and thousands more online, and I was there, because I've talked with him a couple times before. This guy, he's really bright. He says, he made fun of the NOMA model, non-overlapping magisteria. He's like, no, it's completely overlapping magisteria. He's like, here's all of the science knowledge science will ever gain. God knows all of that exactly. They match completely. That was his model. Now, I made sure I was the first one to ask a question because I already had my model and I didn't agree with him. I said, well, I understand what you're saying, but that's from God. If there is a biblical God, then all the science that we'll ever get to know will match what God already knows. I agree with that. But we're not looking at this from God's perspective. We're looking at it from our perspective where we're trying to study science and theology. From our perspective, we don't have perfect knowledge. And we're not perfect. So that's not valid. I got to give this guy so much credit. His lack of having too much ego, it was amazing. So after this huge talk, the first question just challenges his coma idea. He just goes like this. You're right, your model's right. And then in the next minute, he rattled off some verification that I didn't even think of that verifies that one. So this one, we're going to eliminate. So that one, it's not that. What about the next closest? Proof. People who ask for proof either don't understand science or have a different interpretation, a different understanding of the biblical God than I do. If you think, here's what I'm saying. Science doesn't believe in proof anymore. They used to, they don't now. Now science just believes when you stack all this evidence on one theory, if it has way more evidence than anything else, then it's that much more likely or probable it's accurate. But they'll never say it's 100% certain or proven. They always leave that little tiny bit left, like law of conservation of matter and energy, or the beginning of the universe. All the evidence is on one side, so that they said that's absolutely the highest probability, but it's not proven. So science doesn't believe in proof. I don't think the biblical God does either. The biblical God is not interested in proving that he exists. The biblical God wants a relationship of love and trust that requires something much more profound than proof. If the biblical God wanted us to prove that he exists to get into heaven, heaven would look like this. Well, except for Penny. She wasn't as intelligent as the other nerds were. So proof, not going to happen. What about conflict? There was a book in the 19th century, History of Warfare between science and with Christian theology. So in the 19th century, 1800s, this became pretty popular, this conflict idea. And all these big names, Carl Sagan, Lawrence Krauss, Daniel Dennett, well, Sagan actually knows the truth now because he's passed, but Lawrence Krauss, Jerry Coyne, Daniel Dennett, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Neil deGrasse Tyson, they support this conflict model. That just shows some of the most brilliant people, when it comes to then going outside of their field of study and using logic, philosophy, and so on, or history, they can be extremely weak and inaccurate. And I'll show you why. There is Oxford University and Cambridge University. They not only have studies in history of science, but the history between science and theology. This is spread all over. There's journals on it, conferences on it. We have people devoting their entire life to the history of science, and what they will tell you is, we reject the conflict model, at least as it applies to Christian theology. They were wrong. They used misrepresentation, inaccurate scholarship, personal biases. They said there's actually few conflicts, between Christianity and science, and often they interplay and support each other. Now, if you disagree and you say, no, Christian theology and science have conflict, okay, you can have that idea, but your idea is only worth what evidence you have. You better have more evidence than scholars, because this is a scholarly consensus. If you want to read anything, here's guys who written on it. No, am I going to throw the conflict model away? No. Because every different belief system, atheism, agnosticism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Mormonism, they all contradict each other on foundational points. So science will have conflict with inaccurate belief systems. So we need to keep that conflict model, because it is going to work for all of them but one. Now, even with the one accurate one, even if we want to assume Christian theology is accurate, and we have good evidence for that, but even if it is, people are still involved. So you can still have some conflict between Christian theology and science. The big question then is it apparent or real? If it's real, that's a scoreboard strike against Christian theology. If it's apparent, then it's not. For example, the Big Bang. How Christianity has come to view the Big Bang as against Christian theology blows my mind. Atheists must just have really good marketing, and Christians must just really have a thing against science, because when they put God out of the schools, I think Christian churches, the pastors and parents, they're too busy with running a church, running a family. They don't have time to get into science. So I think they're kind of afraid of science, and they turned against it. Too bad. This is a great evidence for their belief, but they've dropped the ball. What about evolution and miracles? I'll do this real quick. Is this apparent or a real conflict? All right, evolution. I could give a bunch of reasons. I came here for Darwin's Day, and we brought in an evolutionary biology professor to kind of come at me. He agreed with me. What I call the talk much ado about nothing, because here's the thing. Let's just forget the arguing about evolution. Evolution isn't even a player in whether God exists or not. Evolution, even if it were true, not a single evolutionary theory can also say, and no God was involved. Because it's not capable of doing that. Here's why. Here's what science is able to view. Science can describe nature and events using initial conditions and natural laws. That is what it's able to see. So when it studied the beginning of the universe, we saw things in nature and we got natural laws. We can explain how the universe had a beginning. But here's the thing. If all of nature had a beginning, the cause has to be outside of nature. The cause has to be beyond nature. That is now beyond science's ability to view. But what science can do is it can find properties in nature that point to what type of properties that cause must have. But it can't comment and say there's no God involved. Same thing is with the cause of life. Let's just say we had a little petri dish in front of us. We watch non-living things become living things, and it turns into all the life that has ever lived on the planet. We see it right in front of us. Does that mean no God is involved? No, science still can't say that. All it means is we can explain things and we see how it happened naturally, but science has no view out here whether there was some intelligent agent interacting with it. Science is incapable of saying that. So even if evolution were 100% proven, it doesn't mean there was no God involved. In fact, what we do find in the Petri dish is, DNA is mathematically equivalent to language or code. Language and code have never existed unless they've been produced by an intelligent, purposeful agent. And when you talk about the DNA code, you're talking what Bill Gates says, DNA is a computer program, but far, far more advanced than any software ever created. I can go on and on with other things that we find here that points to that there must be some intelligent type cause, but let's just move on. So, what do we have here? Why do so many people think evolution is in conflict with belief in a God? Well, because relationships are complex. This was the latest theory on the relationship between science and theology. They said it's called complex contextualized. You gotta, just like a real relationship, it's complex. There's context going on. Now that's really good, but it's not the final answer. So we know it interacts. What type? Is it coma, completely overlapping? No. Is it proven? No. Conflict doesn't fit with Christian theology. It's going to with any other theology that's inaccurate. If Christianity was inaccurate, then it would be here too. Christianity is either here or here. So here's the final thing to eliminate so we know. Which one of those two is it? Well, it's kind of both, but here's the problem. This theory, it's great at explaining specific data like evolution. Why does it look like there's a conflict? Well, because look at the context. You have people with biases, and it's complex because we don't have all the information yet. We see some things that support evolution, some things that don't. So this is why it seems to be an apparent conflict. But the problem is, this can only explain specific things, like why is there conflict seeming with evolution and stuff. What this can't do is tell us what we really want to know. What we really want to know when we're studying science and theology is which one's accurate, because that's the one that's going to impact us more than who your spouse you get, more than your job, more than your health. This is going to impact you at the highest level. So that's what we want. This one will give us that. So we talked about the symbiotic relationship. Science and an accurate theology will mutually benefit and support each other. But here's where I added my thing to finalize the last one. I call it stoma, symbiotic trending overlapping magisterial, because trends overwhelm all claims and all opinions and all hopes, just like a scoreboard. You saw that Michigan scoreboard when they were getting the national championship this year. They just ran that thing up. All right? You see the same thing in theology and science. As time and research increase, and the theory that I gave works for any field of study. You can use mathematics in Christianity, psychology in Christianity, personal experience or history in Christianity. As time and increased research goes on, it goes up like this. Now, this isn't a real graph, but if any of you want to do a thesis, I don't have the time to do it, but we can make a real graph of this in any of those fields. Correspondingly, in every other belief system, as time goes on and research goes on, they get more and more conflict. Their agreement between science and that belief system goes down and down and down. And trends overwhelm your hopes and opinions and all the bad info that you get, because you can't get around it. And if you want a specific example, are you like, well, that wasn't a real graph. I'll show you a real graph now. In the 70s, early 70s, we started finding, hey, it looks like this universe is like a Goldilocks universe. If this wasn't just right and this just wasn't right, then we wouldn't be here to even be studying. It looks like somebody monkeyed with physics and math and a bunch of other things to make this universe be. Now, if the biblical God didn't exist and it's just chance and coincidence, we would not see this trend. This trend shows us what's going on. As time goes on, these little things that, hey, it looks like gravity was just right. Hey, it looks like the quark balance is just, it looks like the balance between antimatter and matter is just right. As time went on, they didn't go away, we just kept finding more. If you search the scientific literature, which is what this did, here is all the studies of finding how the universe has fine-tuned examples that something somehow is getting us exactly what we need for life to be here. This is the trend. That there is a personal, purposeful creator behind what's going on. It's all actual data. I think Luke Barnes did that. He's a physicist. So here it is. You're the watch person. So let's do a summary. Here's what, so what, now what? Here's what. We have different cameras to study our universe, make sure we know what's going on in our house. We have found that some of those theologies are in complete conflict. And as science goes on, it's going to be chewing up that theology until eventually that theology is gone. On the other hand, Christian theology, and I just give you one example, I can give you hours worth more. Christian theology has a symbiotic trending relationship with science. All right, so the last part, whoa. You are the watch person. You know, like I said, I'm giving you info, but bottom line is you're the one who's going to have to decide what you're going to found your life on. The reason why I give these talks, there's a lot of other things. I'd rather be mountain biking, doing a lot of other things. The reason why I give these talks is this. I don't want you to be in a surrender cobra. I don't want you to shut off the wrong theology and then come to find out in that little dark corner where that camera was not looking, you have disaster enter your house. And when reality comes knocking, my nightmare during the Michigan game will become your nightmare in reality. And all you'll be able to do is like, I should have known. All right. Any kind of Q&A? Any questions, comments? Yes.
I have a question. You mentioned some of the things that you said were, you had some scripture passages as well.
Oh, yeah.
Evidence that corroborates science and that would, I guess, be what you would expect to find if that religious worldview were correct.
Correct.
What do you think is the most, of all the examples you could think of and perhaps you've listed, is the most powerful thing that the Bible has listed that has
Predictive ability.
yeah, especially in comparison with other worldviews that
Okay,
don't
yeah.
have so for example, obviously, you know, you have a beginning universe in Christianity, but you have the same thing I think in Islam as well.
So
unless
Islam
you-
and Judaism can also
Right.
lay claim to that. For those, what you'd have to do is, there's specific things you can do to show what the differences are, why Islam doesn't work or Judaism doesn't work. But they do have claim to this. Okay, so to me, calling out that there was a beginning of all nature and time and from what was not visible and following fixed laws and all that, that to me is probably the biggest, because everyone else throughout history got it wrong. People would be saying you're crazy. They'd be like, well, so the universe is eternal. You'd be like, no. It had a beginning. Oh, really? All this never existed, then it popped into existence? Yeah. And time had a beginning. You know, so that to me would be the biggest.
That knocks out atheism and maybe like certain paganism.
It does.
But how would you knock out, for example, Islam?
Okay, but I will give you a couple other things, just because I love them. I like the expansion of the following fixed laws and the expansion of the universe. So the Bible says the universe is under a decay. The Bible also, when it uses the word expand, it uses it in all three verb tenses, meaning it started to expand, it's still expanding, it will continue to expand. That freaked me out when I found out. Why would you use all three verb tenses? That's crazy. And then they say it follows fixed laws. Even modern science didn't know we had fixed laws. They didn't prove that until in modern science. So you can do a graph. You can predict, okay, if the universe starts as expanding and it's decaying and it follows fixed laws, this is what the temperature of the universe should be right now, in a vacuum area. It's exactly what it is. So that blew my mind. The other two that blew my mind are in places in Job. Remember, God was hammering on Job about where were you when I did this and that. You know, who are you? Don't really know what you're talking about. Let me kind of. When he did that, there was things I never thought of before. When I looked into him, though, I couldn't believe it. He's like, can you? Now I'm getting this mixed up because I haven't looked at it in a while. But he gave three things where he said, can you loosen the belt of Pleiades? So I think Pleiades is the constellation that has like a belt, like Orion's belt or something like that. There are star clusters there that are, I can't remember, again, I'm messing this up, you'd have to look into it, but in one example, it said, you know, you think you can hold these together? And in most places, things are all spreading apart, but in that case, when you study that constellation area, those stars are actually holding together. There's another one where the sisters, they call them, they said, there's a whole group there, the same kind of deal. Then it says something about, can you something like halt this star? And that star is like one of the biggest speeding stars that we know of. It's just, for it to just get all of that right just blows my mind. Now, how would I do versus if I'm going against Islam or Judaism? I would look at what does Islam and Judaism do beyond this stuff. So Islam gives a bunch of science things. They'll say that semen comes from kind of lower back. You know, got
That's
that.
not right.
Yeah. And I haven't looked at it in a while, so for a minute I was like, did I mistranslate? Because I read the Quran and I got these, but I haven't looked at it in a while because there's other evidences that are much stronger to show that Islam isn't accurate. But they'll say also that a woman is more of a kind of like a warm mud pack. You know, everything you need genetically is from the male sperm. The only reason why you get some genetics from the mom is from the milk, which is totally wrong. So Islam says stuff like that. Judaism, a lot of people think Judaism started with Christianity, but that was really Hebrew. Judaism started its split when you had like the rabbis, and they were kind of went off their own way from the Christians. And so the rabbinic tradition, that started making, so when you look into those things, I don't want to go into it too much right now, because again, I haven't done the talk on Judaism in a while, but there are things that they believe, like that Jesus wasn't the Messiah.
Well, I mean, I'm okay with not having something to knock the Jews out per se, because that's more of we share so much scripture, obviously, with them. You would expect what they do have, obviously, to be accurate. But I'm saying in terms of like, you know, Muslims claim that all day long. We have so many things in the Quran that are scientifically proven, and
Well,
you know, I just want to make sure what we have is actually.
so what we have has been verified scientifically. I can give you dozens of stuff. I can give you half a dozen more just on the cause of the universe that it predicted right. Now, with Islam, I can also give you a dozen things that they got completely wrong science-wise. But I don't even bother with that. If I want to speak against Islam, what I do is I first focus on what we have in common. We both think that this is, you know, God is the most important we can have. I'd be willing to sacrifice anything in my life to get the right relationship with God. Do we agree on that? They'll say, yeah, we'll agree on that. And they're very good. Muslims are great for discussions. You know, they're open to talk about it. But then I'll say, okay, so where we differ is, you know, we differ on a few things. So we differ, for example, on the Trinity. That's the big one where we differ. And in that one, I'll say, well, you know, it's, in this case, we can show an inaccuracy in yours because there's a contradiction. What does Allahu Akbar mean? That means, you know, God is greatest. You know, God is greater. So in every great thing, God is the absolute highest level. And we agree with that, but it's not possible in Islam. Because in Islam, what's the greatest ethic? The greatest ethic is probably love. If God is just God the Father and there is no Holy Spirit of Jesus, before God created everything else, who does he love? Himself? That's weird. He is needy then. God would need to create other things in order to even express and experience that greatest ethic. That's a big problem. Not to mention, God only loves you if you're following, you know, the pillars and everything else. I know people who love better than Allah. He's definitely not self-sacrificial. I have a God who personally came down and showed sacrificial love. That's the greatest ethic. Not to mention in the Quran, you can do multiple verses showing that they think the Torah and the Gospels are the Word of God. Now, what they'll say is they're corrupted. People who say they're corrupted don't know the Quran. Their Quran, you can show multiple verses that also say anything that is God's Word is impossible to ever be changed ever. So, they have to believe in the Gospels and the Torah, the Torah. And if there's a contradiction there, that's a problem for the Quran, not for us. That's how I go after there. But like science-wise, I would just say, hey, we're in the same boat. We got this for us. You just, wherever you go further, that's where you expose yourself and you get it all wrong. Is that decent?
Yeah.
You know that there's a verse that says Jesus existed before time began. Did you have that as a quote?
Yeah, well, John, what is it, 1 through 3? It basically says all things that were created by him. Nothing that was created but by him. So what that is saying is you only have two possibilities. Something that is uncreated or things that are created. God the Father, everyone would put here. But this is what I use with Mormons and Jehovah's Witness. I'll say, you guys, if you're trying to change the Bible, if it's a man-made change like we believe it is with Mormonism and some, there's mistakes that you will have forgotten to translate. And so in John, I thought it was 1:1 through 1:3, it basically says that, and there's no way around the fact. What it's saying is Jesus is an uncreated being, just like God the Father. You can't get around it, because everything that was created by Jesus. So, but specific verses, there are specific verses, I can't think of them offhand. I'd have to bring up my Jesus talk.
Because I remember always just sharing that, like you said, it wasn't really until, was it Hawking's, and when they extended Einstein's equations and showed that time had a beginning. I mean, this is like the 80s.
Yeah. Well, good question.
So in other words, no one even believed time had a beginning until this point, but yet it said Jesus existed before time began.
Right.
So it was showing that time had a beginning before.
Oh, the Bible did.
Thousands of years.
Yeah, the Bible has multiple verses saying that that there was a beginning of time also, and that it began with space.
Okay.
So you're right. Yeah.
So in terms of the Richard Dawkins crowd, just because there were the 4 horsemen of atheism, one of them's dead, I think, right?
Hitchens.
Yeah, so you're right, he figured it out. So
Yeah.
in regards to Dawkins' crowd on the evolutionary side of things, because I grew up hearing more so the Dawkins and the Sam Harris arguments before they were even popular from the scientific world. Is there a particular reason why that view is kind of ballooning more as time goes on versus like that clashing with, say, your arguments? Is it really just they have better marketing?
Oh, that why like evolution?
Well, the Dawkins view of evolution, like the idea of the view of like
Atheistic evolution.
Yeah, the science and theology being against each other. Because I know there's a saying like theology is the mother of sciences. I've heard before.
Well, it depends what the public wants to hear and what books they're going to buy.
Okay.
So the scholars in the field who study this, they know conflict theory doesn't work with Christian theology, and it's all out there. But Dawkins, Neil deGrasse Tyson, so on, they're not reading that material. They're closed off to it.
So they're not being real scientists at that point, then?
No, they're being foolish. But it's the same foolish mistakes Christians make too. I mean, for example, when I went to give one talk, I saw this kid come in, and he was just jonesing to go at me. I knew he was just gonna come in attacking when my talk was over with Q&A. He was just ready to go at me. And so I went through all of this, and it was a science talk too, so it was more in my field. And he, at the end of it, he looked different. And so I'm waiting. He didn't look like he was, something changed. So he didn't argue a single piece of the evidence. What he said was, he's like, all right, let's just say that all the evidence you gave wasn't true. And I said, that's an odd assumption, but okay.
Say everything is exactly like I want it to be.
Yeah, and that's kind of what he was saying. He said, well, I know it sounds bad, just go with me with this, to get my question out. Let's just say everything you said not only didn't support Christianity, it went the opposite way. He said, would you become an atheist? And I said, not right away. I said, because my defense mechanisms would kick in. I'm just like you and everyone else. We all have defense mechanisms. Our head is supposed to keep us safe. Our heart gives us great pleasures in life, but our head is supposed to keep us safe. And a lot of times our heart overwhelms the head. So if you prove to me atheism was true, because I'm so comfortable now in Christianity, I would use all kinds of defense mechanisms. I would try to not listen. I would seek out my little internet safe havens that support my view. I would do all that. The difference, though, with me than some other people is I'm neurotic about the truth. I'm like OCD with it, because I know if your thoughts, your beliefs, your worldview beliefs, your foundation determines your thoughts, your choices, your direction in life, your goals. It's going to, and especially if there's an eternity after, it's going to impact you on the highest levels. So I'm not going to put that on something that's not true. I'm too selfish that I want good for me. not to be dropped into unexpected consequences. So I said, I would eventually become an atheist, but it might take some time.
Okay.
So, did I answer?
Yeah.
Oh, so those people are the same way.
Right.
They're not looking into this stuff. They have been shown this stuff, and they didn't answer it well in the debate. They got their head handed to them in some cases, but debates later, they're using the same arguments, which shows they're not taking information in. That's a problem. Christians do it too. But, thanks for coming.
No, I'm gonna be back. I just need to use the bathroom.
Yeah, this went longer than expected. Yeah.
Most of our meetings do.
Are there any like books you would recommend to
Book of Mormon.
dive into this stuff? Just like you said earlier, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist.
Yeah, that one's excellent, but it's, that was written a while ago. There's a lot more stuff. So, and I'm not saying this just to plug, I got one coming out called 5 Smooth Stones. That's going to have things that I felt were missing from other books. If you give me your email, I can keep you up of when that's coming out.
Okay.
But if you want, it depends. Do you want really high level philosophy to where the highest level logic and philosophy? That's William Lane Craig stuff. That's reasonablefaith.com. If you want heavy science stuff, reasons.org is good. That's Hugh Ross. He's an astronomer who was an atheist who became Christian based on this kind of stuff. And he's extremely, I've talked with him a number of times. He's a great source. And they have a lot of other science sources. So those ones are good. If you just want straight, detailed arguments that pretty much will wipe out any other belief system. When I say wipe out, this isn't like a competition where you're trying to win. You're not trying to win the argument, you're trying to win the person. So I still use combative language because I want to kill ideas that are bad, because bad ideas create victims. So I want to kill those ideas but still love the person. 5 Smooth Stones will do that. It'll give you'll have to choose which argument you like. Like if I were any of you, I would pick one argument, the fine-tuning argument or the morality argument or the argument for Jesus or whatever one you like the best and start getting on top of that one. And I'm going to give 5 in the 5 Smooth Stones. So.
Yeah, because my senior year we did apologetics.
Oh,
as one
cool.
of my classes, and they really focused on the I don't have enough faith to be an atheist book, and he mentioned like the cosmological argument, the teleological argument, which is fine-tuning.
Yeah, there's that. Well, Turek, I think he did that with Geisler. Turek is excellent. He's got a lot of new stuff since then. Stealing from God, he's got out now. That's really good if you want to go against atheism. But Turek, I love watching his stuff. He's really good for that. But if you want the strong philosophy stuff, I'd still say William Lane Craig. The heavy science, that's Reasons. If you want good interaction stuff with the general, then Turek is really good. He's cross-examined.
Who's the Origin of Life guy? Turek was just interviewing me.
Oh yeah.